right, welcome everybody. This is our after lunch session workshop on document automation or document templates and automation with Clio. So we'll get started here so you can kind of see the deck. We're gonna have a live demo throughout. So a couple different segments here, but if you have questions, need help with something, we got some facilitators in the back of the room there. We got Justin White and Shelby and Nathan back there as well. So throw a hand up or just kind of look a little clueless and they'll kind of track you down. They're gonna keep an eye on things. So I am Joe Kazrowski. I work on the Lawyaw team at Clio. Before that, I worked at a law firm for a while, worked at the Minnesota State Bar, been in legal tech for about 15 years in various capacities. In my current role, I work on the content team. We build templates that people can use out of the box, but also we set up custom templates for people as well using the Lawyaw platform. So the topic for today is document automation. And the reason we're talking about this is that it can save you a lot of time by letting technology do the heavy lifting, letting technology do the routine, repetitive tasks, so you can focus on the areas where you add the most value, where you can use your legal expertise rather than data entry and things like that. So as we get going, the question you want to start thinking about is, how much time do you typically spend drafting documents each day? And there's some stats out there, the Legal Trends Report, that probably most people in the room heard about before yesterday, if not before then. And you can see some of the stats out there, but think about how much of your time is spent drafting documents and how much time you could save if you improve that process. So we're going to talk about Clio manages document automation and Lawyaw are two of the big ones here. But just to see where people are at, how many people use Lawyaw for their document automation right now? All right, a couple, yeah. We're new. I mean, Clio acquired Lawyaw last year, so that's not entirely surprising, but we've been an integration partner for a while. But you have questions after this, there's a couple different places to find information. There's gonna be the Level Up with Clio area, where I'll be. Andreas is down there as well, so they get info on Lawyaw, as well as Clio Manage, Clio Payments, Clio Grow, all that stuff. You can also go over to the product lab where Justin and Shelby are hanging out, or the customer success center if you want some one-on-one time. Patrick will be there, Nathan will be there, Mike's gonna be there as well. So a lot of opportunities to get more help with Clio Manage, Clio Grow, Lawyaw, things like that. Moving on to the next one. How many people have used the document automation within Clio Manage? All right, yeah, okay, got a few more people there. So that'll be a little more familiar as we get going here. How many people use a different document automation tool? Okay, we don't need to name all those. And then how many people don't use any document automation right now? All right, got a few there as well. So hopefully there's something in this presentation for everybody, depending on your familiarity and your level and what your tech stack looks like. So we wanted to try to bring a little something for everybody. So again, what we're trying to do is add efficiency. And so here are a couple quotes from some Lawyaw customers looking at the time they saved. And as we saw with the Legal Trends Report, going from getting paid 1.6 hours last year to 2 hours a day this year, it's only 0.4 hours, but in a week that's 2 hours. In a year, that's adds up to 100, and then at an average rate of $300 an hour, you're talking $30,000. So those incremental changes add up and definitely have an impact on the firm's bottom line. So in addition to getting paid more, if you can be more efficient, you can add profitability to your firm. So we want to look at, for those of you that use document automation, how much time would you say that you save per document? And so we're looking at 5 minutes or less, 5 to 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, or 15 minutes or more, okay? So think about that at the document level and how many times you draft that document. So one survey says that 20% save at least 1 to 5 minutes, but 35% save 15 minutes or more, and that's per document, right? So if you're drafting that document a lot, you're gonna save a lot of time. That's an incremental game that's gonna keep exponentially growing your savings and your efficiency. Another example, if you do fixed fee billing, so let's say you don't use document automation and it takes you 2 hours to put together a form packet for a client and you charge $300 for that, your effective hourly rate is going to be $150 an hour. But if you can reduce the time spent drafting from 2 hours to 20 minutes, your effective hourly rate goes up to $900 an hour, which is well above average and probably a few standard deviations away from the average. So yeah, if you're into statistics, you can do a lot of fun stuff there. So what we want to do big picture is look at how you can add automation not only to this little piece, the document drafting, but big picture, how you do that throughout your workflows from intake to e-sign. And so depending on how you do this, the data has to get into the system somehow. Whether it's, you sit down with the client, you're talking to them, you're writing down notes, and if you don't have, document automation or you don't have practice management, maybe you turn around and immediately put that into Word and you're manually drafting it, or you're manually entering it into Clio. But then somehow you still have to draft that document so it comes out of Clio and you're putting it into Word. The flow, what we want to do is avoid that repetitive entry where you're entering the same or someone is entering that same data over and over again. So we want an intake that's fully automated, like with Clio Grow, where the client does the data entry, and then that data pushes into practice management, into Clio Manage. And then Lawyaw reads that data and pushes it into your form templates for you. And then you turn around, that automatically flows into e-sign, and it goes back to the client. So the client does the data entry, and it flows all the way back, and you never have to re-enter the information. So what we're going to look at, as we talked about, is automating your workflows, right? And we're going to look specifically at templates in Clio Manage. And then we're going to talk about a few other things here a little bit later about things you can do in Word. We'll kind of tease that. But then we'll look at Lawyaw, and then we'll kind of touch back on Clio Grow toward the end. And so the takeaways here are going to be that you're going to be able to create a template in Clio Manage, and we're going to show how to create that same template in Lawyaw. So we're going to start with a very simple document here on that side. So that's just a power of attorney form from British Columbia that we did for a particular client in a particular matter. And what we want to do is automate that so we have a template that can be used for any client in any matter. And as we start to get going here, we want to remember to iterate, right? It's not a one and done thing. This is an ongoing process. You don't want to try to get it perfect off the bat because it's not going to happen. So you want to go back and you want to revise that. And you want to continually improve and add efficiency to your process. So we're going to start first looking at the different types of forms you can automate. And there's two main flavors. There's going to be your PDFs, which are your fillable forms you typically will get from something like your courts. You download them from the website. And then there's going to be Word documents. And that may be your custom or proprietary documents or something else you get from a third-party provider, or maybe the court in some states actually offer Word templates as well, or Word forms. So let's look at the PDF side first. So we're going to jump into our first live demo here. And one of the new features that was announced at this ClioCon is that you can now draft Lawyaw court forms right from Clio Manage. So what you do is you go into your matter, and then you'll be able to go to your Documents tab. And like before, you'd be able to draft from templates, things like that. There's going to be that new button on the far right there. There's a new option called Draft from Lawyaw. And what that's going to do is that's going to bounce you out to the Lawyaw document automation system. And so it's going to land you in your library. This is your home page. And it's going to start with sets because that's where you really see a lot of value. But we're going to start with just looking at the court forms. So you start with something familiar. So we go to our court forms tab, and we can see that you're going to see the different libraries that are available. And as we heard yesterday, both Jack and Tucker mentioned, court forms are now available in all 50 states. Also have British Columbia, and we're working on a few other places and adding federal forms besides the immigration ones. If you don't see your library in your subscription, you can add that by going to the settings in the lower left there, down there. And you'll be able to add any additional court forms libraries that you need. But as I mentioned, one of the big advantages that a document automation set will have, or document automation tool will have over the forms from the court are that you can build these sets. And so when you're filing or drafting a document, you're not drafting just one document. Typically, it's going to be 5 documents, related documents, or 10 documents. And so if you're just downloading these PDFs from the court website, you're downloading it, you're entering all the information. Then you download the next one and you enter that same information again, and you do it over and over and over. But with the set, what you do is that you put them in the set, and then you enter the information once, and it populates all the documents in the set. So again, we're reducing the amount of time you spend entering the same information over and over again, letting the technology do that repetitive work. And so, okay. So here we're going to take a look at Colorado for a simple example. And let's say we want to do a dissolution. So we can do a search for that. And we know that we are going to file our petition, which is 1101. But we also need to do a summons. So we can select both of those. And if we want to, we can use the actions menu there and get a preview to make sure, yes, this is the form I want. It's the one that looks familiar, things like that. And if it looks good, you can add to selection. And so then we've got a set built on the right-hand side. This is sort of ad hoc. So you can do this, if it's not something you do more than once, you can do it kind of as for just one particular client to matter. But if this is something you use over and over again, what you want to do is use that Save as New Set button up there, which will save this collection of forms. And then next time you come in, it'll already be built. And you'll be able to pick that form rather than having to search for them and add them each time. All right. So, and if we go back to our sets menu, we should see our new set right at the top there. And so we can hit the add button, or under the actions menu, we should be able to draft that as well. So once we have them in our set, we go to the bottom lower right there, and we can draft our documents. And so this is where we're going to start entering our information. And so because we came from our new flow from Clio Manage, it's already got the matter identified. If we were just doing this in Lawyaw, you'd be able to pick any of your active matters that are coming over from Clio Manage. Or you could create a new matter in Lawyaw if it's not something that exists in Clio or you're not using Clio Manage. And you can give your document set a title. And then when you're ready to go, you hit the next button. And this is where you're going to enter the client and matter information. And so here you can see a lot of it, the green check marks are there already. That means that the information's coming in. So the things like attorney, petitioner, respondent, court, those have those little gray boxes at the top there. Those are tied to Clio contacts. And so if we have related contacts set up in Clio Manage, that information is automatically going to come into Lawyaw. Same with your custom contact fields. If you don't have that mapping or you don't use related contacts, you can still pick any of your contacts from that drop-down list or create a new contact. Some people don't want to have a lot of contacts they don't need in Manage. So if you're doing a probate, you want the personal representative, maybe the spouse, maybe the children, but you don't want everyone else. You don't want other heirs, cousins, second cousins, things like that. And so you can create those in Lawyaw and keep your Clio Manage instance clean. Because Lawyaw reads from Clio, but it doesn't write back. So it gives you that option to keep your data separate if you want. But you can also see that some of them don't have a green check mark. And so if it doesn't have that, what that means is there's at least one field that's not entered. And that's okay. In this particular case, it means that there's no children in this matter. And so, as we'll see when we generate the documents with the button on the bottom, one of the things we'll be able to say is that there are no children of this marriage. So we can see that the information is coming in with all the information we pulled in from Clio Manage, but there's some additional information we can add. So there's some check boxes, we can add date of birth, things like that. And then we can jump to the other form and see that the same information came in to the other form as well. All right. And once we've got it all filled out as much as we want, you can see there's now a Save to Clio button in the lower right, along with the regular download button, which is saved it locally. You can upload it to any other system you use to manage your documents, or you can send it to the built-in e-sign tool, which we'll see a little later. But if you click the Save to Clio, what that's going to do is write it back to that same matter that you worked in initially and put it in your document library. So you'll have your finished templates right in your Clio Manage library. All right. So now we're going to jump back to the slides here for a little bit. And maybe you picked up on some of these benefits and weaknesses with the court forms or the PDFs. But some of the advantages are that you don't have to maintain the content. You don't have to worry about, is this the most recent or up-to-date form? That's what your platform is doing for you. So Lawyaw is making sure we have the most recent court forms version, so you always have the up-to-date ones. Again, reusing the data across forms, you enter it once and you reuse it, that was a big selling point. One thing we didn't look at too closely, but that the font will automatically resize. So when you download a form from the court website and you type, if you got too much text, it gets cut off or truncated. With Lawyaw, it's going to resize to make sure all your text fits in that box. Another advantage, and some of the court forms now have smart forms where they do some of those auto calculations, like with an inventory or things like that. But the court forms platforms are going to do that for you as well. Another new feature, which we'll circle back to a little later, is that you can start from kind of a pre-checked form. So rather than like California, for example, there's a form interrogatories, 50-some questions, you pick 20. If you always pick the same 20, why are you checking those 20 boxes every single time? So with form templates, you can kind of pre-check those boxes and save that as your starting point rather than starting from the blank form. And the big one, again, is sets, that you're not doing this one by one sequentially, you're doing it all at the same time in parallel. But there are some limitations with the PDFs. A big one is that the content's not editable, right? You can't change what the form says. You can only fill in the blanks. And a lot of times, courts will get around that by using checkboxes. Check here if this is true, check here if this is true. But that text, both options are going to be in there, even if you don't need half of it. You don't have the ability to format a lot of the text that's inserted. Applying styles, bold, italics, different fonts, different things like that you would have in Microsoft Word. You also have a limited number of iterations for roles. So a lot of times, court is going to give you a table for children, and there may only be 3 blanks. Well, if you have 5 kids, you have to figure out what to do, and sometimes that's attach another page, which can be tricky in a jurisdiction where you pay per page, or you have to come up with some other solution. And the big one is that there's no conditional logic. So again, like we saw on the previous example with the dissolution, there were checkboxes. Is this a dissolution or a legal separation? And even though we knew there are no kids because we didn't enter any names, we still had to check a box for that. Conditional logic would do all that for us behind the scenes. So the other type of document that you can automate is Microsoft Word, particularly .docx, which is the most current version of a Microsoft Word document. As I mentioned earlier, the example we're going to use is a simple power of attorney we set up for John Doe. So the first thing we're going to do is look at Clio Manage and how you would automate this within the Clio Manage platform. So we're going to jump back over to our live demo here and look at how do we get started? Now, how do we do this? So we have the Word document. This is familiar. It's got client and matter information. The first thing we recommend is that you prepare your document. And this means going through and identifying the information that is specific to that client and matter, the things that you don't want to show up in every document. And this is one of the big issues with just doing it manually with copy-paste, is that you may leave something in there. You may miss a reference. There may be metadata, something that refers to the previous client. You may have a pronoun that doesn't match, or a noun-verb that doesn't match if you go from 1 petitioner to 2 petitioners, things like that. So what we recommend is you go through and highlight all that stuff, so you can kind of flag that and know what you want to replace with your information coming from Clio Manage or Lawyaw or whatever your system is. So we'll just jump ahead to kind of the highlighted version here to show you what that would look like. And so you can see we've highlighted here, we've got a date, we've got a number of contacts, we've got 5 contacts, and a couple of other fields. So there's some things that aren't going to be contact information. So date is not necessarily tied to that contact, so that's not going to be a custom contact field, it's going to be a custom matter field. With a power of attorney, we need to know there's 2 of them, so we need to know, can they act independently or do they have to act jointly? So that's going to be a pick list. And then we also have another one where we just have to give some free form if there's going to be any conditions or restrictions on that particular grant of a power. So once we've got this highlighted, it becomes very easy to see, what do we need to have in Manage that can map and populate that document. So if we jump over to Clio Manage, if you're, I don't know, people are familiar with setting up custom matter fields, but if we go into our settings menu, and then we go to our custom fields, and here you can see that we don't actually need the custom contact fields, but there are custom matter fields. And we've got them set up, but if you needed to add them, there's the add button in the upper right there. And if you click on that, you basically give it a name, and then you pick the type of field you want, whether it's a date or pick list, single line of text, multi-line text, etc. All right, and so if we look at the ones that we set up, if you're going to create the ones we need for this form, the first one let's look at is the execution date, which is at the bottom there. So if we edit that, or if you're hitting add, you would give it a name that makes sense to you, and hopefully you have a standard naming convention so that you don't have mismatched fields. And then you pick the type. So you pick the date field here, and then you would save that. For the next field, we're going to look at that co-AIF power, so the top of the list. And so this is, are they going to be an independent attorney in fact, or do they have to act jointly? And so you can see that we have two options here. You know, they may act separately or they must act together. And that's the text that we want to insert depending on what the user picks for that client and matter. So again, we choose pick list and we add the options. And then the last one is our conditions and restrictions. And here we just need to have a big blank where they can type in anything they want. Okay. In the example we had from our John Doe matter, we just typed in the word none, but in some cases they may want to limit it or they may want to put conditions on it. So we want to give them a lot of flexibility, so we're going to use multi-line text there. And as we'll see in Lawyaw, they have the same kind of options that you can use for fields. So once we have those set up, we want to jump back over to our matter. And so, as we'll see later, you can actually set up Clio Grow to populate this and map into those. So if we go to our John Doe matter, this one actually came from an intake. But we've got, if we click into that, we'll see that we've got all of our custom fields populated there. And then we've also got related contacts set up. And so if you need to add related contacts, you can do that by editing the matter, and then going to related contacts, and then you'll be able to add them. And all you need to do is define the relationship and add a contact, or create the contact but doesn't exist in manage. And so here we've set up the 5 that we need. We've got our principal, which you could use as client because that already exists in manage, but one of the things we like to do in Lawyaw is kind of keep things as granular as possible. Because you may have the same person in multiple roles. So if you're doing a will and your spouse, the testator's spouse, is the spouse, obviously, but also the personal representative, maybe a trustee, maybe a guardian of the person, something like that, and that may be fine in that particular case. But if the testator's not married, you don't want the spouse being assigned to all those blocks of text, because if there's no spouse, then someone else has to be the power of attorney or the personal representative. Or maybe the spouse isn't competent or something like that, or you don't want them to be in one of those roles. So we want to be as granular as possible to give us flexibility with these documents. And so that's why we're using principal here rather than just relying on client. So once you have those set up, you can save the matter. And now that you've got all your data in there, the next step is to go and look at your merge fields. And these are what are going to replace the client-specific information with tags that are going to be generic and allow you to put any client and any matter information into your template. So again, you go to settings, and then you go to documents, and this is going to give you a nice big list of merge fields. And as you can see, there's a lot of options here, depending on how many relationships you have set up and custom fields. So what I recommend is that you pick a matter you're familiar with, or the one that you're working in, like the John Doe matter. So at the top, you can go up and pick a particular matter. So we switch that from our first matter to the one where we know the data. And then you'll see that middle column there. So it might be a little hard to search the one on the merge field list, but the middle column is the data you're familiar with. So if you do a search for John Doe, you can quickly find the merge field you want to use to replace John Doe. So we could use client name, but again, that's not what we wanted to use. We wanted to use principal. So we want to go down until we find principal name, which is the third instance here. And so to copy that, on the far side there's that little icon. You click on that, and that's going to copy it to the clipboard. And then what you do is you jump back over to Microsoft Word, and you can paste it on top of John Doe. And we have it highlighted so you can see it. And again, you'll be able to use anything in Word that you need to. You can do find, replace, stuff like that, replace one at a time. All right, so we just highlight John Doe, and then we paste in our merge field on top of that. And now our template is going to be able to insert any person or contact that's assigned to that role of principal. And then we'd repeat that for other data points. So we can jump back over and find street address for principal, and do the same thing, click the little button, copy our merge field, jump back over to Word, and drop it in. All right. Next line. There you go. Okay. And so we keep doing that. And we can do the same thing with our custom matter fields. So if we go back over to Clio Manage, we can search. Again, we do POA because we know that we named all of our custom matter fields with POA. And it's also going to identify a few other things. So we want to go until we find the one that has the date, so date of execution. There we go, and we hit the little copy button as well. Yeah, let's get that one. Okay. And then we just do that. And we do that for every piece of data that we want to replace with a merge field. All right. And so we're going to jump ahead a little bit here and kind of show you what this would look like after we've replaced all of John Doe's information. And so this is what it looks like now that it has all the merge fields in there. All right. So it's got a lot of stuff that doesn't look like English anymore. But it's going to work because it's a template. The technology reads it. We don't need to know. I mean, it helps if we know what it means, but we want the technology to know what it means. All right, so once we have everything in there, we save it in Word so that it's on our desktop, and we're going to be able to upload it into Clio Manage. So once we've got it saved, we jump back over to Manage. And we go back to our Documents menu. Documents. Or the documents menu, not or is it a little, that guy, yeah. Right there, that one. Yeah, there you go. And now, you see you can create documents here, but we want to go into the far upper right there, and that's going to be our templates menu there. We click on that. And then we can create a new template with the blue button there, blue button, yeah. And we upload the one we just saved. Right, so we go and find it on our desktop. It would be number 3, or that one would work too. Yeah. Can't have it open, so we need to close it. But we've already uploaded it, so we can just kind of skip ahead here as well. But once you have it uploaded, you choose a category. So again, it's good to kind of tag them in a folder so they're easy to find. So you can call it agreement, call it forms, whatever's going to make sense to you. All right. So once you have it uploaded, you can see in our list here, you can just kind of cancel out of that. So the one we uploaded is at the bottom there, the POA. If we need to upload it, so again, iterative, remember, if we need to make a change, we can hit the edit menu, and that's going to let us upload a new version of that. So we generate it once, we say, oh, it doesn't look quite right. We go make a change in Word, save it, repeat the process by doing edit. All right. Oops. All right, and then the next step would be to actually generate a document from that template. So here we can go back to the matter. So we go back to our John Doe matter, and we go to our Documents tab. And we hit the new button like we did with the court forms, but this time we choose Draft Document from Template. And we choose our template at the top, which is our, and then we can give it a name and choose whether we want it as a PDF or Word document for the finished populated document that we can send to the matter, file it to court, whatever we need to do. And so we hit the Create button. It's going to say, yep, we're working on it. You wait a little bit, and eventually it'll say success, it's been saved, and you'll find it in your form library there, because remember we tagged this one as a category of form. I don't know if those have today's date yet, but it'll be at the top of the list once you get a little green check mark in the lower right there. But if we want to look, so we can also use the View menu if we want to preview it right in the Clio app there. So we hit View, and it's going to show us our Word document there, fully populated for John Doe. All right. So that's the process to set up, and again, this is a one-page form, so that's the process to set up a very simple template in Clio Manage. Again, if you have questions or want to take a look at that, if you're working on this through it, we got our folks in the back there that can kind of help you out as well. So what we saw here is that, and we can jump back to our slides here and give Patrick a little break, is that we went from this kind of highlighted, prepared Word document for one client and one matter to a template that can now be used with any client and any matter in our system. So we're going to just take a step back here and think there's a few tips that we want to look at that are going to help you. And so with manage, there's some things they don't have is like conditional logic. So your template is pretty much going to be in the same form for any client in any matter. So you're not necessarily going to have a lot of different pagination, and you don't necessarily need to change page numbering or paragraph numbering and things like that. But as we move into Lawyaw, some of those word functions are going to become much more essential. We're going to need to know how to add dynamic page numbering or paragraph numbering, because if you use a clause, if the testator isn't married, you're going to remove the paragraph about the spouse. And you don't want it to go from 1 to 3 to 1 to 3. You want that third paragraph to renumber to 2. And you also want to know how to define a custom numbering set. Because a lot of times you're going to say Article 1 or Article 1, Roman numeral 1. And that's not one of Word's defaults. So we want to look at how to create some of that custom numbering. And so here's an example where you can just go in and to the menu here to insert some of that. And we'll go over this real quick. We have a webinar coming up on the 19th that's going to go into this in a lot more detail. But this is stuff that's going to really help you when you start adding more complexity to your templates. Another one that's going to be helpful is section breaks. So as I said, one of the powerful things with Lawyaw is that you can do sets. So a lot of times you're going to break up your content into different templates. So you may not have things in one Word document, but in other cases you may need that. Like you may have a complaint with a certificate of service on the bottom. And your footer for the first 8 pages is going to say complaint with petitioner v. defendant or petitioner v. respondent. But on the certificate of service, you need a different footer. And if you're working in one Word document, what you do is you add a section break and make it continuous so that it doesn't change the pagination or have an extra page break in there, but it allows you to separate your footers so that you can have one footer for the first 8 pages, section 1, and then a different footer for the last page, a certificate of service. Another thing that's helpful is to use some of the built-in Microsoft Word fields. People are probably familiar with the date field where you start typing the month, and it asks, you want to put in the date and the year, and so you hit enter, and it's going to do that. But there's other things you can do with that date field. You can just use the year. So a lot of times in signature blocks, you're going to have a blank for the month, a blank for the date, and then you're going to hard code 2022 for the year, which is fine for about another 80 days, give or take. And then you have to change it. So you're updating your templates at least once a year. If you use the built-in Microsoft Word field, it's going to automatically insert whatever the current year is. You can also do that if you want to use just the month. So you could change it from something like October 11th, 2022 to the 11th day of October 2022. And you can also use the field format and put a mask on it and use ordinals. So instead of having it be 11 for the date, it'll be 11th, right? And so there's a lot of built-in functionality in Word that can make your life easier. And so as I mentioned, some of this is not just nice to have, it's a must-have for Lawyaw. Because we're going to add conditional logic, and that's going to change the pagination, and that's going to change our numbering. So we need to know how to do that. So here we're going to jump back into our live demo. I think Patrick looks refreshed, so we can move forward on that. So the first thing we're going to do is Lawyaw integrates with Clio. So much like Manage, it's going to read your custom matter fields. It's going to pull over your matter information, your related contacts, things like that. And so if we jump to the live demo here, we can see that Patrick's going to turn on our integration. So we're in Lawyaw. We go to our settings. We go to integrations. If you don't have it enabled, there's going to be a connect button here. If you do, you hit the sync button, and it's going to pull any information that you've updated in Manage. So it's going to pull over all your active matters and all your contacts. And the contacts include your custom contact fields. So once you have that set up, we're going to jump over to Word, because much like Manage, that's where we set up our templates. And so we can start from the same place we started in Manage with a highlighted kind of prepared document, but we can also start from the Clio Manage template we just set up. So it's possible to convert your Clio Manage templates into Lawyaw templates. And there may be an easier way to do that in the future, but we don't have to talk about that quite yet. If you want more information, stop by our booth. So we're going to go through how to convert this to a Lawyaw template. So the first thing you do is you need to make sure that you have the Lawyaw Template Builder add-in installed. That's a little blue icon up there in the far right for you, left for me. If you don't have it, you can go to the Insert menu, and then Get Add-ins, and then type Lawyaw in the search field, and then hit Add after you hit search. There you go, right. All right, and then once you have it, it's going to show up on your home ribbon. So we go back to home, and there it is. So we click on that, and if you haven't logged in, you'll be able to log in here. It's the same login as your website, which can be your Clio credentials if you synced your accounts. And then the first thing it's going to ask you to do is name your template. And this is the name you'll see on the website. So much like we were able to rename it in Manage, we can name it here. We'll also be able to rename it later if we name it something now and then change our naming convention. So we can go ahead and create a template. And this is just going to basically save that Word document into Lawyaw. And so if this is the first one you've done, you'll only see that top blue button, which is Start from Scratch, which is what we're going to do. The other option, Import from Existing, can save you time. Again, we're looking at ways to save you time. So say you set up a document like a trust, right? And now you want to set up a certificate of trust. If you hit Import from Existing, it's going to automatically create every field you used in that trust, so you can just pick the ones you need. So you don't have to go and re-add them. They're all going to be right there, ready for you to just click a button and add them. But as I said, we're going to start from scratch here. So if you sync to Clio, you're going to get your Clio Matter card by default there. And this is how you access your custom Matter fields. And so you can see we have our POA fields in there. And just kind of to step back here, we have to find a way to talk about data, right? So when you're drafting a document, if it's for one client and one matter, it may just be a document. But when we're going to abstract that for any client and any matter, we have to figure out, well, how do we refer to John Doe when it's not John Doe, right? Or how do we refer to 111 First Street, right? And so Lawyaw uses what we call cards and fields. Fields are probably familiar. So we have merge fields in Clio Manage. Cards are just logical groupings of related information. So we have two flavors of that. There's going to be the roll card, which we'll get to in a second here. But there's also an other card. And the Clio Matter card is just a specific example of an other card. So if we go back, and we can look at our Clio Matter card, and so we know that we have 3 custom Matter fields set up. And so to add those to your template here, you can go and highlight the text you want to replace in your document. So we can highlight the first merge field in that first line there that we use to create the template in Clio Manage. And then we go find the corresponding example in Lawyaw, which is going to be our date of execution on the Clio Matter card, and we hit the plus, and it drops that in there. So that's how you add a field in Lawyaw. So we can go ahead and we can do that with our other 2 custom Matter fields as well, with our co-AIF power and our conditions and restrictions there further down in the document. Right. Perfect. And you may have noticed that we don't just have a big long list of available tags like we did in Manage. Things are broken down in cards. And so we have our Clio custom Matter fields, but we don't see our context. And that's because in Lawyaw, contexts correspond to what we call roll cards. So we need to create cards for this other information. So we hit the new card button, we can see the 2 types. And so roll cards correspond to your contacts. So that's going to be people and organizations. In this particular document, we're going to need to create one for the principal, and as well as our attorney in fact 1, attorney in fact 2, witness 1, witness 2. But we'll go ahead and create it for principal. And you can see here when we create it, it's putting fields in there. And these are your kind of default fields, the things that you need to know about contacts. So it's name information, first name, last name, full name, street address, city, state, zip, phone number, email. But there's also one at the bottom here, personal pronoun. And this is kind of a field that it's a multiple choice field. So this is how we do some of our flexibility. So rather than having, if we're doing wills, single will, male, single, female, married, that type of thing, we can use pronouns and use a field to control that. So we have he, she, it, they. And that gives us one template rather than multiple templates. So that's one example. And we'll look at the field types in just a second here, but I just wanted to call that out as kind of a little teaser. So we can go ahead and do the exact same thing we did with our Clio Manage fields with our roll card fields. So we can go ahead and replace the address there with the street address field from Lawyaw by hitting the plus sign. Okay, and that's just going to drop it in like we just saw. But there's another way to insert fields. So if you know that this field is used in multiple places, like principal name, or in a trust, you're going to use the trustee's name and the grantor in a number of places, possibly several hundred. There's another way to insert it. So if you highlight it, you can copy that text. And then if you go over to your principal roll card, and instead of hitting that plus, there's 3 dots. If you click on that, there's going to be bulk insert. And this is Lawyaw's equivalent of find and replace. So you paste in the field you want to find, hit find, and it's going to tell you the number of instances that it found. And you can do it one by one if you want to review them. And again, going back to our example where we have a spouse. So if we have Sally Doe in there, and in one place we want to replace it with spouse full name, but the next one we want to replace it with principal full name or personal representative full name, we may want to do it one at a time. But here we know that every time we see John Doe or matter.relationships.principal.name, we want to replace that with principal full name. So we can hit replace all. And so that's going to replace it. And the other thing you see here is that it picked up the underline style. So it was bold before, it stayed bold. All right, and we can change that. So maybe we want that to be all caps. So we highlight that. We can go up and change that to all caps using the built-in word functionality here as well. And so this is a change from manage as well. You can't apply that uppercase can maybe affect your tags. And so this can be helpful in Lawyaw because you may want it all caps in the caption, but in the body of the document, you may want it mixed case. All right. So the other type of field in Lawyaw is an other card. So we can go ahead and create one of those. So if we didn't have custom matter fields or we didn't want to store this information in Clio Manage, we could create a power of attorney information or power of attorney card here. And once you add the card, you can see that this time it didn't add any of those fields because it's not related to a contact. We don't know what fields you want to add to that. So we hit add field, the card, and then we just need to give our field a name. So if we start with like date of execution, we can see that there are 4 types. So there's going to be short text, which is going to correspond to a single line of text like a name and address. There's long text, which as we saw in Clio Manage is like a multi-line text, but it's for things like a real property description. There's multiple choice like we saw with personal pronoun and that we're going to see with our independent versus joint power. And then there's date. And so if we look at the date field, you see here that not only can we choose to make it a date, we can choose the format that it appears in the document. So we talked about how Microsoft Word can do some of that. Lawyaw can do it as well. So you can do October 11th, 2022. You can do 11 October, or you can do 11th day of October 2022. So we pick the one that makes sense for a document, and then we hit add. And so now you can see that card is on there, and we have the same options we had before. We can hit the plus sign, we can use bulk insert. So if we wanted to replace that, if we don't want to use our Clio custom matter field there, we would highlight that field by clicking the yellow and then the gray to get the whole thing. Then we can hit delete. And then we could drop in our new field that we created in Lawyaw. And so most of the time you're going to use custom matter fields if you want the information in manage. But if you don't want to store the information in manage, or everyone doesn't have a managed license, maybe you want to create some of that and store some of that information in Lawyaw. So you do have that flexibility where you can store information in manage or in Lawyaw. And so we talked about that. And the field formatting types. So again, you can change that. You can bold, italics, uppercase, sentence case, things like that, whatever you need to do to make the template look the way you want. So we're going to jump ahead here as well. Yeah, you can make it nice and big, yes. So we'll pull up the finished Lawyaw template here, skip a couple steps. And so once we got all our fields in there, you see we also got some gray stuff here, and this is just a little teaser. We're going to talk about the conditional logic in a second. But once we got everything in there, what we do is at the bottom of all our cards, and we can actually, we'll be able to, or go back to the other one, zero the save, because we have, so number 3, I think. Yep, so at the bottom of, under these, all the cards and fields on the right, there'll be a save template. So we click on that, we have 2 options. We can save as existing, which is going to update the version we've been working on, or we can save as new. And this can be useful because maybe you want to create a branch point. Like if you want to do reciprocal wills, right? So you set one up for the testator, but then you want to have one for the spouse. So you save as new to create the spouse version. Or if you're using it to create a stub, as we'll see with some of our starter templates, you could build a case caption. We have the caption and the signature block, and you want to use that as a starting point, and you save as new to create your petition, you create your certificate of service, and all those different things from that template. And then once you've saved it, we can jump back over to Lawyaw. So we can jump back over to the website then. And it's going to be basically the same process here that we saw, but we want to pick it from the list. So if we scroll down and grab the BC one there at the bottom, or the middle, BC Clio version. Yep. So we hit the preview, action preview. We can see, make sure this is the one that we wanted, that we've been working on, and it's got all the changes we made. If we're, again, iterating, we may have changed in Word and may not have reflected yet in Lawyaw. So we want to always hit the reload button to make sure our changes are there. If they're there, it's the same process we saw with court forms, where you can hit add selection, draft document, and you go in and you populate it. So we go ahead and do that, give it a name, and we pick our DOE matter, or I guess it's, yep. Or any matter, right? And you can see, again, green check marks. All this information is coming from Clio Manage. So we've got our custom matter fields there at the top. We had that pick list selected. We had none entered. We had the date entered. And then we had all of our relationships mapped. So it's pulling over our relationship information. And then again, same process, generate. You'll be able to e-sign or download because we started in Lawyaw here instead of starting in Clio Manage. So we don't have the Save to Clio button because we didn't start from that same point in the document library and Manage. There's also a toggle at the bottom there. So you can see here we have everything highlighted in yellow still. That's because we want to show you what's editable. So maybe, again, we have conditions. So if you wanted to remove Arthur, you'd be able to go back and remove them. So you can go back and forth and see what's editable. But once you're ready, you want to see the finished product, you can turn that off, turn off the highlight and see what the finished document looks like. All right, so we'll jump back over to the slides again here and look at a couple best practices. And so you can see it's not a process where you're going to get it right away. But one thing we want to do is we want to get to a point where our finished template is error-free, because any issue you have with that underlying template is going to be propagated to every document you generate from that. So if you have a formatting issue where the spacing isn't right, if you get an extra line break or something like that, that's going to happen. You're going to have to remove it every time. So you want to try to remove that and get things as pristine as you can in the template so you don't have to go and correct that every single time. Another rule, this is kind of our rule of thumb, our 80-20 rule, is again, we want to add efficiency. We don't want to automate just for the sake of automating. So are you automating something that's going to save you time? For example, you're in a probate, you're doing a final inventory, you have a whole list of different assets. The form is going to have the auto calculations that's going to sum it up for you, but do you need to know each particular asset anywhere else in the package, anywhere else in the matter? If not, why are you creating fields for that? I mean, why are you storing that information? I mean, whether you enter it once in Lawyaw or just in the document after you generate it, you're entering it one time. So is it worth the effort to set up all those fields if you're only going to enter it one time and use it in one place? So think about, ask the question, is this going to help me? Is this going to make my job easier? Information should only be entered once. So this goes back to the sets and some of the value there. But it also refers to some best practices. As we'll see on the next slide, talking about pronouns, we ask, do you want to use he, she, it, or they for an individual, couple, or corporation, what have you. We could also ask, do you want to use his, her, its, their? But because we know what the personal pronoun is, we can use conditional logic to insert the appropriate one. So we don't have to ask for the same information or related information again. Or with a will, if we know the spouse's full name, we know the testator is married, so we don't have to ask, is the testator married? This is another one, as we referred to a little earlier, about naming conventions. Make sure your templates are consistent globally. So if you call it one thing in your first template, use that same name in the other ones. If you don't use the same name, you're going to have to re-enter the information, right? If you don't use the same name in Clio Manage that you use in Lawyaw, it's not going to map, and you're going to have to re-enter the information. So you want to be as consistent as possible to avoid adding inefficiency and having to redo the work. We want the technology to do that, and one way to do that is have a standard naming convention. The last one is just kind of a best practice. You want to try to be as gender neutral as possible, so you don't have to have multiple versions, right? We have multiple choice fields, we have conditional logic, things like that can adjust your templates. So you don't want to hard code anything that you're going to have to adjust or worry about later. So as I mentioned, pronouns. So this is one of those best practices, right? So if we know, whether it's he, she, it, or they, we can use conditional logic to insert his, her, its, their, as well as him, her, it, them, or himself, herself, itself, themselves. And so this looks a little messy here. And the second part, or the middle part of that, all that gray stuff is our conditional logic. And so it takes a little time to set it up front. You have to add all those tags. But then when you're generating the document, you're only being given one question. You're only being asked personal pronoun. So you only have to check one button. And it's going to put in all the other pronouns. But if you don't want to deal, and again, it's a best practice, it's not a rule. If you don't want to deal with setting this all up, or it's easier for you to just ask that and check multiple ready buttons, there's nothing wrong with doing personal pronoun, but then also creating a possessive pronoun, where you have to check a button for his, her, its, their, and an object pronoun for him, her, it, them, and whatever other pronouns you may need. So again, it's just what's going to add the most efficiency for you. Is it easier to have one question to answer and set up all the conditions on the back end, or is it easier to avoid setting up the conditions, having to maintain that in your template, and just ask the questions with personal pronoun fields, or pronoun fields, multiple choice fields? Another example, we talked a little bit about this before with Microsoft Word, using the built-in date field. So think about with dates, there's dates everywhere. Like we had a date of execution in our example here. Do you need to store that? For an execution date, probably. For a complaint, the filing date is relevant because you're going to refer to it somewhere else. With a will, the execution date's important because you're going to need to refer to it in codicils, or if the will's probated, things like that. So if it's a date that has meaning and it could be referenced somewhere else, store it and manage, store it in Lawyaw. But if it's a client correspondence, again, 80% of the time that date doesn't matter. Use the built-in Microsoft Word field. And also think about, do you want to just leave a blank there? Are you going to send this out for e-sign? And your e-sign tool will insert the date, so you don't need to create a field for that. Or you can use conditional logic to account for more than one of those scenarios. So like here, if we enter a date, it's going to put the date. But if we don't enter a date, it's going to insert a blank. And so you can give yourself flexibility within that template, not only for the substance of it, but how you're going to execute that template. Another thing to think about, and again, with Manage, we're not too worried about the format, although here, this is something that would come up in Manage. Think about the length of the field. John Doe is nice and short. It's 8 characters, right? John space Doe. But your next client may have a longer name, or may have a middle name, may have a suffix, prefix, a title, what have you. And so the length of the name could adjust your tabs. So on the far side there, we have an example where we're just inserting a sentence. And so we don't have to worry about alignment. But on the side closest to me here, we have a table where we have column headings. We're inserting the child name and the date of birth and the parents for that child. And so if the parent names get long and we use tabs, it'll wrap around and part of the name will show up under the name of child column. Or we're not going to have nice, clean lines. And so to make sure you have those kind of hard breaks and keep your alignment right, you want to use a table. So here, regardless of how long the name is, your columns are going to be nice and tight and aligned. And the text will wrap within each column. So we did a simple template here in Lawyaw, but we have a bunch of other ones in the template exchange. I think Tucker referred to this as well. But we have starter templates in all 50 states, 6 Canadian provinces, 3 other countries, and some that you can use out of the box. There's court forms, there's statutory forms, some other examples there. But if you need something to get you up and running, or you want to use it as an example, take our complaint and then customize it with your language, you can do that. But you have several hundred there, and we have the case captions as well, so you can build your own personal library. So let's look at some next steps. What else can you do? Or what's the next step after you have this kind of basic template creation? So we're going to look at some of the new features that were announced here for Lawyaw's court forms. Specifically, the ability to duplicate forms within a matter, as well as create form templates. So we can jump back over to our live demo. And so we're going to look here at an example. Let's go into our Illinois library. We've got quite a few libraries to browse through here. But let's say we're going to do an affidavit of service, right? And so we go and search for that. And we're going to find the 3513 there. We want to preview it to say, is this the one I want to use, right? And so we look at it, and it's a very simple form. It's got some information that needs to be filled in, a couple check boxes. And so if we just generate this the normal way, we're going to have to fill in each one of those data points every time. And coming from manage, a lot of that's not going to map because we don't know who is serving who. It's probably not the client that's doing the serving. You don't know whether it's a petitioner or respondent, things like that. You don't know the way, the process, the service, things like that. But maybe for your firm, you always have the same person doing the service. And so rather than typing that information in every time, we can again kind of do that pre-check thing we talked about before. So rather than doing the add to selection here, what we do is if we go to the actions menu, we can do create form template. And so this is going to look similar to what we saw with the court forms that we did earlier. But here, we haven't selected a matter. So this is entering information before we pick a client and matter. And so say for our firm, we always have Sam's server doing service. So we can enter Sam's name, Sam's address, email, phone number, things like that. We can also say, again, 80% of the time, 90% of the time, it's going to be personal service, so we're going to want to check that first checkbox. All right. So we're entering the information that doesn't change. And again, another good example here, which is longer, would be the form interrogatories, where you always ask the same 20 questions. You want to pre-check that. We're just using a one-page form here to make it a little easier to talk about. Once we have that information entered, the only thing we're going to need to do each time is put in the date and who is served. So once we're ready, we can hit that save template at the bottom and give it a name. Right. And then we can X out of that. And now on our home screen, we can see at the top of the list, there's a SAM server affidavit under the form template menu. So again, we can add this to a set. We can draft it just by itself. We can combine it with other court forms. We can combine it with other Word templates, whatever we need to do. But here, we're just going to draft it by itself. So we go ahead and just hit add for the affidavit. Draft selection there. Yep. Give it a name. So now we're going to also look at duplicates. We can call this maybe affidavits of service or whatever we want to call it. Pick a matter. And next. And you can see here now, and it's going to say no fillable fields, but that's because, again, we don't know who's going to do the serving. So it's not able to read anything from our matter information. So that's fine. So we hit generate document. And even though we weren't able to ask those questions, petitioner, respondent, client, there's already information in here because we have started from a form template. But now we also know that not only that Sam's doing the service, but we know in this particular matter, Sam needed to serve 3 people. And we know that Sam served them today, so we can enter the date. But before we enter the name, we want to go over to the form list on the far right, and there's going to be a duplicate button right there. So we click that, and we add the number of copies. So we know it's 3, so we want to add 2, because we had 1 to start with. And so now there's 3 versions. So now if we type a name into one of those blanks, the date's going to pull through to all 3 of them, but the name is going to be unique to each instance or each copy. All right. And once we've got those in there, the next step, again, if we had started from Clio Manage, we'd have a Save to Clio button. But we can also send these out to e-sign. So maybe we want to send these to Sam to sign, right? So we can hit our e-sign button. And the first thing we do is select our documents. So by default, it's going to select all 3 of them. We can change the order. We can unselect them. So maybe we don't want Sam to sign one of them. Or maybe our packet has an instruction or sheet or checklist that we don't want to send out for signature, but we want it there just to make sure we don't miss anything. And you can also upload additional documents. So there's additional things you need to include in the packet. You can do that. Here we want Sam to sign all 3 of them. So we can hit the next button. And then we choose who's going to sign it. So your first option is only me if I'm signing it. So if it's a filing, maybe you want to sign that. Or me and others if it's you're signing a separation agreement or some sort of agreement or representation agreement. or you want to do only others. In this case, I, the preparer, don't need to sign it. I only need Sam Server to sign it. So I click that. I enter the name of the person doing the signing, and then put in a valid email. And you can see you can add additional signatories if you need to do that. You can change the order, but we only need Sam to sign it here. So we go ahead and hit the next button. And then what you need to do is you can hit the add signature button, which will let you drop a box where you want that signature. And even though there's not a dedicated place for it here, you pick the person that's doing the signing. Here we only have one choice, but if it was you and others, you'd be able to pick, where are you signing, where's the other person signing, things like that. But maybe even though there's not a space for it, we can add a date next to the signature on one of these just to show the add date button there as well. Yeah. So, and then you do the third one. Same process, drop the signature in there. So you can see you can add it in each document, you can skip documents, whatever you need to do. And then once you've got that, you hit the next button, and that's going to give you an option to copy someone if you need to copy someone on that. But otherwise, you can add a cover email, telling Sam what to do with this. Why are they receiving this? So you give it a name, so it's a more descriptive subject, and then you put in a message. Then you hit submit, and that's going to send the email to your client or whoever's signing. Sam wouldn't be the client here, and you can see it's got a status of pending. That means it's been sent, but it hasn't been signed. You can see some other ones we've sent. You can see draft. That means we started it, but we didn't actually submit it. You can see completed. That means that everyone that needs to sign it has already signed it. And then once you're in here, you can go to one of the completed ones, and we can see that's got the audit trail right in there. So we go to view on that. And you can see that it'll be at the bottom of the page, so it doesn't interfere with your e-filing tags at the top of the page in most jurisdictions. And so looking at some of the next steps, and we've teased some of this already, right? Conditional logic. We showed a couple examples of that. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second here. Template sets. Again, you can have sets of CORD forms, form templates, Word documents, either separately or together. And the thing in Clio Manage, we just showed this with the DOE matter. You want to make sure that you set up your related contacts and your custom matter fields to whatever extent you need to be able to reuse information. But the other piece we're going to talk about is Clio Grow and how you can use that to push your information and get the client to do the data entry for you. So with conditions in Lawyaw, there's basically two flavors. We like two. There's two roll cards, other cards, standalone conditions, field-based conditions, power of two. So a standalone condition is basically you just ask the question, right? Is the testator married? Is the petitioner pregnant? Yes or no? If they answer yes, you insert this text. If they answer no, you do something else. So it's very straightforward. It's very easy to do, easy to set up, and it's logical. When you read the question, you know exactly what's going to happen to your document. But again, one of our best practices is don't ask the same question twice, or don't ask similar questions multiple times. So if you know spouse full name exists, the top operator there, we don't need to ask, is the testator married? So the operators let you check various states of the fields that are used in your document. So rather than asking the question, we look to the value that was entered in a particular field. So spouse full name exists, spouse full name does not exist. Child 1 full name exists, child 2 full name exists. So again, you can use child 2 full name exists to say, is there one child or two children? Child versus children. So you can use that exists, does not exist to do your noun verb, make sure it matches, is, are, switching those type of things. Or going from attorney in fact to attorneys in fact, right? You can also use equal. So if your multiple choice field, this is how we would set that up, right? So if it equals he, we insert his. If it equals she, we insert hers, that type of thing. And then contains is another option there. If you're inserting a long text string, you can use that to look for just part of it rather than retyping the entire thing. It's also a way, which is a little deeper, but we can talk about this downstairs if anyone wants to get into it, but how you can turn a multiple choice field where you can only pick one option into a multi-select field where you can select any number of options. So if you have a multiple choice field for grounds for divorce, you're not going to pick one ground, right? You're probably going to pick 5 or something like that. And so you want to be able to have a multi-select. And so contains is one way to do that. You can also do compound conditions. So you can check things like child 2 full name exists and child 1 full name does not exist. And we do this because we want to insert the number 2. Again, because we don't want to ask them how many children you have if we've already asked them what are the children's names, right? So if they've entered child 1 name, child 2 name, we know there's 2 children. So we can use a compound condition to figure out what the right number is. If you want more information on that, here's a link out to we got a bunch of videos out there and some articles on that as well. Otherwise, stop down. Justin will help you out in the product lab there. Or if you want some one-on-one time, Mike and Patrick are in the customer success area. The other one, again, so now we're coming back to the beginning. We focused on kind of the middle piece here and the end with e-sign, circling back to your intake. So looking at Clio Grow, it's part of your sales funnel. It can pull in information about your matter, but you can also ask information that you need to populate your documents. And if you get that information in your intake, it'll flow into Manage and it'll be available to you in those documents. So you don't have to re-enter that data or ask for that data later. And so you want to look at whether it's going to be a Lawyaw template or a Clio Manage template. What information do you need to ask for? So we're going to need to ask for our 3 custom matter fields, and we're going to need to ask for our 5 contacts. So you can access your form templates in Clio Grow by going to your Forms menu there, and then going to the button in the upper right way over there. And you can create a new template. And then when you do that, you're able to build an intake form. And so you can add some stuff at the top, you can add instructions, but then also along the left-hand side, you can add the contacts that you want them to fill out. And so maybe there's some stuff already here if you're already doing an intake that you want them to fill out your matter, but you can add in the stuff specific to your forms. So you can add in your principal, you can add in your attorney in fact 1, attorney in fact 2, witness 1, witness 2, things like that. And then you also can add your custom fields later on, choosing a field type, and then mapping it to your Clio Manage custom fields. You want to create them in Manage first, and then map to them in Clio Grow, so that Grow can push them into Manage. Once you have that set up, you want to make sure you publish your form, which will give you a link that you can then send to the client to get them to enter that data for you. And so the client will see something like this, where they have nice branding at the top, some instructions, and then all the different fields you want them to enter. So circling back, the things we talked about were how to create a template in Lawyaw and Clio Manage. We touched on a few other things, but we can definitely get into this more. Go down to the product lab, schedule some time in customer success to get into that, or just reach out to us later and we get into some of the more specific things like Microsoft Word and Clio Grow. And so our starting point was a Word document, and our endpoint are these 2 templates. We have our Clio Manage template and our Lawyaw template. And so you can see in the Lawyaw template, the gray boxes, right? And so this is using that exists operator we talked about. So if attorney in fact 2 full name exists, we're going to insert S, making it attorneys in fact, or persons rather than person. And if we don't enter, so attorney in fact 2 full name does not exist, it's going to delete that second block there that has the name and address information for our attorney in fact 2. And so rather than have on the Clio side, we're going to have that every time. So we're always going to have 2, or we're going to have 2 templates, one for 1 attorney in fact, one for 2 attorneys in fact. With Lawyaw, you can use conditional logic to combine those. And so that is a somewhat short tour of the different ways to set up templates in Clio Manage and Lawyaw. There's a link here out to my contact information and some additional resources, how to get in touch with the team. But if you have any questions, happy to answer those now, as well as any of the other folks here can, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Sure.
Who's asking, sorry?
Thanks so much. That's super helpful, actually, because I don't use Lawyaw yet, and we're considering it. I'm kind of confused about where the document templates are stored. When you use a Lawyaw template, does the template you make live in Lawyaw? Does it live in Clio? Like, where does it live?
So yeah, the templates, much like Clio Manage, are going to be stored in the cloud. So in Clio Manage, when you create it and you upload it, it's stored in Clio Manage. In Lawyaw, when you hit that Save Template button, it's stored in the cloud in your Lawyaw account along with your Lawyaw data. But you can also save it locally, which we recommend like as a backup, save it as a .docx file in Microsoft Word. So in Clio Manage, you have to save it as a .docx to upload into Clio Manage. In Lawyaw, you don't actually have to save it as a .docx. But you can, but you want to be careful that you're opening the right version, and also autosave, check things like that. But yes, technically the template itself is going to be in your Lawyaw cloud account. The generated documents from that can live in a number of places. Anything you generate is going to be in your Lawyaw account, so you can go back and look at your document history. There's a Documents tab that shows you every document or document set you've created. You can get to it through your matter and see everything you've done in that matter. So you can always go back and regenerate it if you lose it. So if you happen to hit download and you can't find the Word document or the PDF, you can go back into the matter and say, I generated this on October 26th, pick that one, reprint it or re-download it. So that's going to live in Lawyaw. But you can download the Word document, you can send it to eSign, or you can save it to Clio. So the finished document can live in a number of places depending on your workflow and where you want to keep your documents. Yep. Okay.
For eSign, two-part question. When you send the eSign, does the email come from at lawyaw.com? And then when you receive the document, so you will return as one PDF?
Yes and yes. So yeah, so the emails will come from noreply@lawyaw.com. And you'll also, as the person who submitted it, you'll get notifications. So when it says, whoever has signed it, everyone has signed it, so you'll get emails from that no reply as well. So noreply@lawyaw.com is where it'll come from. But in terms of, so yeah, we had 3 documents there. When they sign it, it's going to put them into a packet. So you'll get one PDF with the audit trail because they're signing it at the same time. So if you want them as separate signatures, which some courts require that each document is a separate filing, what you want to do is basically e-sign each of them separately.
I have finalized the document in Lawyaw and I let it migrate over to Clio. And then life happens and I need to change the date. Can I edit in Clio?
So yeah, the way the sync is set up, Clio Manage is your source of truth. Whatever you have in there, when you sync, that is going to supersede anything you've done in Lawyaw. So if you generate it today in Lawyaw and it'll have a date on there, you'll have a spouse name on there. If you generate the same document, you sync from Clio Manage, and then 2 months from now, you generate the same document, but you have different information in Clio Manage, different date, different spouse, it's going to use the new information. So if you go into the document library, it's going to have the old version with the old data, but if you go to that generate document in the flow that we showed here, it's always going to pull the most recent information, and Clio Manage is your source of truth. So if you update it there and sync to Lawyaw, it's going to have that updated information.
Sorry, who's next? Oh, good, sir. Sorry.
With the court forms, are they mostly in PDF or in docs? And the reason that I ask you that is because I got the impression from what you said that the PDFs could end up not being editable. So you could be stuck in a situation where you have a court document where you can't make a change in what their standard document is, and you might end up typing the whole thing over again.
So yeah, the 2 flavors of Lawyaw, there's court forms, which are going to be PDF, and then there's the Word documents. So those are going to be the editable Microsoft Word documents. So the court forms, they're always going to be PDF. It's the form from the court. They're not going to be editable. You can add data, but you can't change the structure. But much like with the previous question, if your data changes, or if the court changes their form, Lawyaw is going to have the new form. If you go in and generate that same form after the court's done an update, it'll have the new form and use whatever. So it could be the same data with a new form. So you can't change the document itself, but we're going to keep the forms up to date. So if you go into your document library, and some people need to know, what the state of the document was at a certain date. So if you generate a document today, come back 2 years later and have a different document, you may still need to see the previous version. So when you generate a new document, you see the current state of affairs. But if you go into your document library, you see kind of the state of affairs that things were at when you drafted that.
Good afternoon, Joe. My name is Crystal. I'm actually one of the Clio consultants with Streamline Legal. I'm also an attorney. Part of what we do as consultants is that we guide and train and also code document templates inside of Clio Manage. We typically recommend that we do document automation templates inside of Manage, and we also demonstrate and show them how you can customize and populate data, but we also show them how to do conditional texting. I guess what I'm confused about is why the comparison was made between Lawyaw and Clio Manage in terms of the templates, why conditioning was not emphasized on the Manage portion.
So yeah, we're looking at the kind of the out-of-the-box functionality and the way that we generally set things up in Manage is you're looking at the merge fields, and most people are going to drop them in, and that's how they're going to use them. And where Lawyaw goes above, or where things become a little easier, again, sets are the big thing. If you're generating it in Clio Manage, you're doing them one document at a time. You're draft from template, draft from template, draft from template. In Lawyaw, you can do all three of those at the same time. And so there's some things you can do in Manage or in using some of the Word functionality to add some of that additional functionality and kind of duplicate that. But the intent with Lawyaw is to kind of be a no-code solution, make it easier to really just kind of visually see, click a button and add it and things like that. And so it's intended to be something where you can add some of this conditional logic without having to really get too deep in it, not having to hire a programmer or things like that, or make it easier. And there are some advanced things there. The length of the document can complicate things, the number of options, and if you make it compound, things like that. And so there are things where you may want to reach out to help for things like that. And we have some videos and resources out there for that as well. We're looking at not necessarily how far you can push the boundaries, but kind of what the intent is and how most people are going to use the platform.
Hi, kind of piggybacking on the other PDF question. So you can't change the PDF form, but certainly the information you enter would be editable after the fact? Like if you came back and realized something was wrong and you had to change it or something changed?
So yes, I mean, the one thing is you can always go back into Lawyaw and draft that document again. So if you want to change it, when you download it, you're going to be using whatever tool you use to edit PDFs now. So if you're in Adobe Acrobat, you can go in and modify the document itself. But it's not going to have fillable fields where you can just kind of swap out the data like you could if you had a court form from the court website. If you want to change the data, what you really want to do is go back into Lawyaw and change the information in Manage or in Lawyaw and then generate the document again for the PDF. So I think we're a little over here, so we'll stick around a little bit out in the hall, but again, you can catch us downstairs. We're gonna have folks in the product lab, level up area, and if you want some one-on-one time, you can book some time over in customer success, but happy to answer any other questions you have about Manage, Lawyaw, or any of these things we talked about. So thanks.